Welcome and thanks for joining us today. I'm Charlie Imbergamo, Director of Strategic Programs at the Nonprofit Leadership Center. We have a few of our NLC teammates with us today, so on behalf of all of us, welcome. We're delighted to have you with us as we continue our mission to develop and connect nonprofit leaders in this virtual space from far and wide. As we continue to emerge from the challenges of the pandemic on our lives, the effect in our communities, and the implications on our work, it feels important to name that this free webinar has set a new registration record for us. And the topic is prioritizing self. Not in any selfish way, of course, but as a necessary condition for showing up for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for our work. Please take a moment to find the chat and to type the name of your organization and the location of your organization in the chat right now. And let's take a moment as we see the names of organizations pop into our feed, and we celebrate you and the communities in which you're working. We are joined today by Kristen Lessig-Schenerlein, who is an internationally certified leadership and positive intelligence coach, as well as a Yoga Alliance registered yoga instructor with additional training in energy medicine. As a nonprofit founder and executive director with nearly 2 decades of building, growing, and turning around nonprofits, Kristen continues to be the change she wishes to see in our world. Her current passion is guiding powerful, mission-driven leaders and teams through the inner work of linking their power and their passions. Moderating our session today is Karina Kletter, NLC's Program Associate. Karina has been an awesome and powerful driving force in this work and providing an accessible virtual experience for all of our participants. She's passionate about what we do and about our commitment to respond to the needs of our community with quality resources. She will take us through some rules of the road for our time together. Karina.
Thank you so much, Charlie. So I will just take you through some of our rules of the road for today's webinar. To minimize background noise and distractions, all mics will be muted for the duration of the webinar. Just so you know, this presentation is being recorded and will be available on our website for future viewing. We have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. If you would like to see the captions but don't see them yet, or would like to turn them off, go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and click the CC icon to turn this closed captioning on or off. We warmly welcome your questions. Please type them in the chat box, and we'll take 10 to 15 minutes at the end of Kristen's presentation for her to answer as many as we're able to get to. If you haven't found the chat box yet, go to the settings at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on chat. We're looking forward to a productive, engaging session, and thank you so much for your participation. On to you, Kristen.
Hello, everyone. Janine. Okay, I see some familiar names popping in. So great to be with you all today. Welcome. It's Wednesday, right? It's a good day to have a little conversation about yourself and checking in and prioritizing yourself midweek. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to begin sharing my slide deck here. And as I'm doing that, in honor of getting to know who's in the room a little bit, I'd love for everyone to maybe just, take a moment and acknowledge some of the symptoms of burnout, right? So prioritizing ourselves, not prioritizing ourselves may lead to burnout. We'll be talking a little bit about that today. And so, maybe you've noticed you've become a little bit more cynical. Maybe you feel like you have to drag yourself into work some days. Maybe you feel like you're lacking the energy to do just the things on your to-do list. Maybe you feel a little disillusioned by some of the work that you're doing. Maybe your sleep habits have changed. right? You're finding yourself not getting a really good night's sleep. Maybe you're seeing that 3 a.m. on your clock or your phone beside your bed. Maybe you're noticing you've got a little bit of headaches or things that are unexplained physical symptoms. So if you can relate to any of the things that I've just mentioned, maybe just drop in the chat what you've noticed yourself recently, any symptoms of burnout that you may be experiencing. I feel like all of us will probably have one of those items that we may have noticed in the past couple of weeks, months, maybe even past few years. So it's good to not feel like we're so alone in this. So if you have taken the opportunity to share something in the chat, thank you. We'll have plenty of time for reflection on our own individual pathways to self-care here. But I want to just ask you, if you don't have a piece of paper and a pen before we get started, maybe grab one, because there may be a few things that you want to jot down. And there's going to be a few points where I ask you for some self-reflection questions. So let's go ahead and jump in today. Thank you. All right, so Charlie has already shared a little bit about my pathway to being here with you today. Most recently, why I am so excited to announce that I just graduated from University of Pennsylvania with my master's in applied positive psychology this weekend, and really thrilled to kind of come off of that weekend, really motivated to bring the science of well-being to nonprofit leaders, and no better place to do that through this organization and the work that they're doing for the communities that they serve all over. So very excited. And I would say that when we speak about self-care, I just want to kind of plant a little seed for everyone. To me, that's a pathway to well-being. Well-being is that we're comfortable, we're healthy, we're happy, right? That state that we are in, this well-being state, is achieved, in my belief, through self-care. So this kind of frames our discussion for today. So in today's session, you signed up, clearly you knew what you were coming in for, but we're going to explore a little bit about burnout. We're going to look at our own definitions of self-care and understand a little bit about the impact of self-care on our individual selves, but also the organizations that we're working with, and in turn, our clients and those we're serving. We're going to have some opportunities to create a little self-care roadmap and see how this all comes together to create kind of a strategy for well-being within our organizations. All right. So what is burnout? Another chance to exercise that chat. Maybe just drop in the chat. What's your definition? Maybe it was something I mentioned earlier, but how might you define burnout? And Karina, if you might share with me what folks are saying, that would be really helpful.
Sure. Overly exhausted, another one for exhausted, when you no longer find joy in what you do. Feeling frazzled constantly, lack of focus, hitting the wall, being unmotivated, fatigue, stress. Another one for feeling unmotivated, inability to focus, more unmotivated, lack of energy. My emotional cup is empty, difficulty concentrating, stressed and overwhelmed, going through the motions, but not achieving. When ice cream no longer helps, you know you're there when ice cream no longer helps. Stressed, drained, not putting in the effort to make things happen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so a lot of similarities again, right? Knowing you are in good company. So you belong here in this session today. In some ways, and maybe it is the fatigue, maybe it is that just lack of luster, right? Adam Grant, during the pandemic or towards the tail end of the pandemic, wrote a lot about languishing, right? And what it means to just kind of feel a little bit ambiguous about where we're headed and what we're doing. So that in and of itself, right, is burnout symptoms. So thank you. So everyone has a little bit of a different spin on it. but also a lot of commonalities. So one thing that, I would say is that saving the world is exhausting. So the missions, I saw the great organizations that you all are with coming in through the chat when you logged on and Charlie asked you to share, right? The work that you're doing, it comes with a lot of effort, right? It is tiring in and of itself. So this state of kind of chronic stress can lead us to exhaustion, that we have those physical signs and symptoms where we might not be sleeping well at night, that insomnia, and maybe this detachment, right? And isolating ourselves, really just not really feeling like maybe going to get together with friends or going out to dinner with family. So that lack of productivity is also a big part of what happens when we're in burnout. And all of us, I know, working in nonprofits, we have a desire to serve. We're working tirelessly towards the missions in our organizations. And I think it's important to realize that if we aren't taking care of ourselves and prioritizing ourselves, how that can affect, right, our ability to execute on those missions. So one of the important kind of pieces of evidence that I have on this, there was an article that I read not too long ago from Judith Rodin, who's a president of the Rockefeller Foundation, former president of the University of Pennsylvania as well. And what she talked about was that the common way that we existed as nonprofit organizations from the beginning was that this belief that if we just worked faster and harder and did more, then we could kind of save the world, right? We could fill all the holes that existed in our communities and meet all the needs of those that we were seeking to serve. And unfortunately now, the pace of change is just too fast. Does anyone here feel like, just by a show of hands, that the pace of their lives right now may be a bit faster than they remembered? Right? So just imagine that pace of change that we're facing in nonprofit organizations. We can't simply work harder, longer, right? We have to look at this differently. And so she really encouraged kind of taking a new look at how do we, as nonprofit leaders, really model a way forward that still meets the needs of our community. I think another little share that I'll have is Jim Collins' work in Good to Great in the nonprofit sector. He speaks about a couple of areas that are really fundamental for an organization to be successful as a nonprofit. Right? It's not maybe about the dollars, but it's about an organization's longevity, about their brand recognition. So that doesn't come without staff being able to kind of retain themselves within the organizations to be able to keep up with the needs of the community. And so we want to kind of just consider the outcomes that we're seeking within our organizations. So a little bit about the burnout rates. So percentage of nonprofit employees, about 30%, right, are experiencing burnout. And there's a rate of turnover in nonprofit organizations that is increasing. Higher than average. And I think this is important to note, right? And all of us have experienced in some way, shape, or form why this may be happening at an individual level, but this is at a much larger scale. So some additional numbers. If you're working within a nonprofit organization, we're feeling like we're overworked, we're under-resourced. Might be leading to disengagement, some of the things that you mentioned from burnout. So if you have been experiencing burnout yourself, right, how have you been combating burnout? Just as of now, before we get any further into my tips and tricks, what are ways in which you have been combating any experiences you may have had to date with burnout? Just curious to know what's been working for people so far. Karina, if you see anything popping in there.
Sure, got some great ideas in here. Wear funny t-shirts on Fridays, dancing, crafts, walking in nature. trying to say no more. It's a tough one.
Mhm.
Go for walks, walk breaks, and stepping away from the computer. Ruthlessly editing my to-do lists, what must be done.
I love that.
Long walks in nature. Listen to meditation station on Alexa. Great idea.
Mhm.
Exercise, yoga, having solidarity with team members, holding boundaries. Blocking my calendar to say, log off, you're not working late tonight. Turn off email notifications on phone. Be someone else's light to get out of the darkness. Zumba, scheduling me time, meditation and taking me time, playing with puppies, my personal favorite. Get out on the weekends and do things completely unrelated to work. The Calm app, prioritizing sleep, deep breathing exercises before work, funny videos on social media, mindfulness breathing, scheduling self-care, exercise and learning to say no, taking paid time off.
Yeah.
To double down on self-care, so taking extra time, getting their lunch instead of skipping lunch, trying to break things down into pieces, having loved ones who can fill me back up when I'm empty, letting those around me know when I'm struggling.
What
And
wisdom.
more still coming.
Yes, what wisdom in this group. So I'm hoping we can save the chat and share this, right? It's not only me sharing with you, but the wisdom from the collective group that has come together here, 124 people as of now, right? So really seeing some of these ideas. I heard a lot about walking. I heard the Calm app, Insight Timer is another favorite. I had an organization I worked with this morning that the nonprofit leader talked about, randomly actually playing in the mud with a coworker's kids at the end of a day, and how that led them to just kind of follow up with some of their coworkers at the end of the day to see how their day went, versus being kind of closed off and tired at the end of the day. They were re-energized. So it can look very different for other people, not only our experiences of burnout, but how we are working to combat those. So thank you. So that's the help, right? That's a help sign, is maybe looking for ways that we can share with each other what works for us that may be helpful to other people. So why do we burn out, right? Work-life imbalance is a common theme for people. I like to think about it as work-life integration, right? It's never truly a balance, right? If we're if things are going well at home, maybe sometimes we feel like then work is sliding a little bit. So I like to work with people to look at, what does it look like to integrate your work and your personal life more? Unclear job expectations, we're not certain. We're moving so fast again, right? That sometimes we are uncertain. Maybe our workload is a bit off. Maybe there's some dynamics within our team, feelings of being micromanaged, that, we want to address some of those dynamics within the team. Maybe there's these kind of extremes of activity in our nonprofit organizations, event season and time. Maybe one of those highs, right? Which can lead to fatigue, kind of not pacing ourselves per se when we're scheduling programs and our events. And maybe we're feeling like isolated, right? So everybody's busy. I'm not going to bother anybody with what's going on with me because everybody has a lot going on. And some of this too comes from being remote, right? So a lot of us have gone to remote work, or maybe a hybrid of that. And so there's a lack of social support, or maybe opportunities to talk about this. So that's some of the factors. Does anybody else have anything that they want to share about the why, what leads to burnout, that would be helpful? Something you don't see here? I'll let that come in the chat. Some of the mistakes, and some of these I heard, right, is that yes is our favorite word. Really hard to say no, right? Maybe we, never mind vacation time. We don't even step away from our desks for lunch. Maybe we don't outsource anything. We just look to kind of repurpose priorities and workloads amongst the current team. We have this general feeling that self-care is selfish? By show of hands, does anyone at any point in time have ever kind of thought run through their mind, if I do this for myself, that would be seen as being selfish? I know I can say that, right? So sometimes undervaluing ourselves and our teams, what we need, that can be a mistake that we make as nonprofit leaders in how we prioritize ourselves. Maybe we have these close relationships. We do this great work together and our colleagues or our friends. And so therefore it makes it even more difficult to have some of the conversations. Or maybe we just, I feel like this is another common one. Like if we work in nonprofits, that's just the way it is, right? We're always tired. We're always exhausted. Like that's the norm that we're working off of. By show of hands, does anyone else feel that that can sometimes be the mindset? Yeah. So we never communicate, right, how we're feeling. We tend to kind of deprioritize that. Someone mentioned on their to-do list, like reprioritizing the to-do list. So we deprioritize ourselves on that to-do list. So those are some of the common mistakes that we make. So these are 3 leading causes of burnout in nonprofits. We care too much. So one of the things in positive psychology that we focus on is individual strengths. Okay, so we believe in positive psychology to build on what is working within an organization or an individual. Well, in nonprofits, more often than not, a common strength is empathy, a strong care for other people. So we care too much. That can be a challenge that leads to burnout, right? Because we're always giving to everyone else. So what I often do is think about, how do we temper that empathy for others? How do we maybe turn it inward to ourselves? Essentially, that can be self-care, right? That can be prioritizing ourselves. Our environment is burning us out. So anyone else feel like, emails are now the instant text messages, right? You've got to respond almost instantly or something's wrong, right? It's like they didn't get back to me. Oh, no. So, we've got the text messaging, we've got whatever, Slack, if you use Slack within your organization's emails. So the environment that we've created technologically is also contributing to our burnout. We're accessible at all times. And there may be a lack of innovation, right? Because we are feeling this burden, we feel that strain, we may not be able to think creatively. So I like to remind everyone, right, that life is a marathon, not a sprint. So oftentimes when we're thinking about our to-do list or our events calendar, program calendar, it's like, just get to this next one, right? Just get to this next thing, and then I'll take a break, right? Again, back to positive psychology. We want to kind of turn that on its head. It's not, happiness doesn't come from, it's not a reward for gritting it out, right? We want to experience happiness in our everyday life, and happiness not being this kind of elated, joyful, exuberant happiness. It may be contentment. It may be kind of calm. It may be humility. So there is a bit of uncertainty in what happiness means to each individual. But we want to not use kind of prioritizing ourselves or self-care as kind of a reward. We want to look at, how do we pace ourselves? How do we not sprint from one thing to the next thing? And if we notice that there are some physical signs and symptoms, right? The sleep issues that some of you mentioned in the beginning, maybe it's some physical pain. Maybe we started to notice that we have low back pain, things like that. These pains are messages. So one of my favorite quotes by Rumi is, these pains are messages, listen to them. And I think about that in how we often ignore these signals that we need to slow it down. We need to prioritize ourselves. We just kind of move through, right, the physical signs that we need to take a break. I know the last time I presented with NLC, I I had COVID. I was sitting here and I had the fans on me, and it was about a year ago. And to me, maybe in some ways I couldn't have avoided getting COVID and during the pandemic, but also, had I worn myself down, was my immune system a little weaker because I had worn myself down. I pushed myself too much. So let's go back to the chat. What is self-care to you? Just fill in the blank. Self-care to me is. And Karina, anything that stands out that we might want to share with the rest of the group?
Rest, recharging, doing things that make me happy, being healthy, reading, putting myself and my health first, filling my cup, taking time for myself.
Yeah. So refilling the cup, right? Thinking about, they tell you on the airplane, right? Put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on anyone else. It's the very same concept, very good, helpful analogy to think about the work that we do every day. So refilling our cup. It's a beautiful children's book about empty buckets, filling buckets. And I think about that often too. So it's a practice of taking care of ourselves, some way, shape, or form. It's a practice of taking care of ourselves. So we're going to come back to this word practice at the end of our presentation. But I'd like for you to consider, right, the self-care as being a practice. So we're preserving our own health, right? No one else is going to do that but ourselves. We're protecting our own well-being. We know that this is a stressful season. We know we have a lot of programs or events coming up. So what are we going to build into our schedule to help us, right? Think about that marathon analogy. What are we going to do to help us move through that time period where we know that there's a lot of activities going on? How do we build in and prioritize ourselves during that very busy time? So to me, this is how we build the case for investing in ourselves, right? To really identify what it looks like for us. Maybe for this woman here, it's dancing in the kitchen, right? It's at the end of the day, putting on the music and just kind of having that be the signal that work is done and I'm transitioning into my evening, my time at home to take care of myself, to express myself. So this is a time we're going to grab that pen and paper, maybe. And if you are driving or listening in and not in a place where you can write things down, that is totally okay. But there's a few questions here that I want to have serve as prompts. I want you to jot down the answers. Nobody's going to be forced to share. But first, when was the last time you took a full day off without checking any work-related emails or messages? Just jot down the answer to that. The last time you took a full day off without checking any work-related emails or messages. How many days last week did you work longer hours than you planned? So maybe you said you're going to leave at 4, 4:30, 5 o'clock, but you jumped back on the computer at the end of the day. Maybe someone stopped you on the way out, stayed a little longer. And when was the last time you intentionally unplugged from your telephone or inbox? Did you know there's that feature on your phone where you can turn off emails coming in? And then when during the next week could you schedule some time for those non-urgent to-do items? Like coffee with a colleague, maybe tidying up your workspace. Maybe there's something you really wanted to dig into, research or industry-wide, that would help with an upcoming program, something new you want to bring into your organization. When could you put some time like that on your schedule in the next week? And what tasks may be on your to-do list right now? It may be right in front of you. It may be something that you can actually see as we're together now. But what on that list might you be able to delegate? Maybe put a little circle around those items. And then what task can only you perform? Maybe put a little star by those items. So challenge yourself a little bit here. And maybe then, last question, when could you intentionally build in a little bit of rest during the upcoming week? Maybe even through this weekend. Rest can be very different, but remember, this is your chance to refuel. So I think about being intentional about how we build in time to refuel, right? So these questions are to kind of get you curious about what it looks like today and what you could build in the future. So for anyone that is willing to share, has it been longer than a week since you took a full day off without checking any work-related emails or messages? You can drop it in the chat or just to shake a head. Okay. Longer than a month? Okay. Longer than 2 months? 3 months? Karina, anything coming in the chat? I can see some physical signs of answers.
Yeah, a few people responding to each of your levels of prompt. We have gotten some saying it's been longer than 3 months.
Longer than 3 months. Okay. So I'll give you another little analogy here about this refueling. So think about a NASCAR race car driver. So I lived for many years in Virginia. So NASCAR race car driver goes around the track, right? They're racing. Well, they don't just wait for their tire to blow out, right? They pull off to their pit crew to change the tire before that happens, hopefully before that happens. So think about these refueling stations and these times that you are intentionally creating and prioritizing yourself as opportunities for you to kind of pull off the racetrack, right? Get that tire changed to avoid the spin out, right? To avoid the blowout. Because my guess is that all of us may agree that when we don't take the time for ourselves, it has an impact, right? On ourselves and those around us, whether it's the sleep that we mentioned earlier, or maybe it's just irritability at home, lack of innovation at work. So when we think about the collective impact of self-care, right, we really have to embrace this idea that self-care isn't selfish, and also see that self-care reaches beyond us as the individual, especially in our nonprofit work, because we're in service to other people. So that if our cup isn't full, right, if we don't have the energy, if we aren't thinking clearly, if we are in our best state, how might that affect the people that we are seeking to serve? So embodying this practice, the practices of self-care and prioritizing ourselves to avoid burnout, rather than allowing it to be something that we reward ourselves with, or in response to it, oh, well, clearly I have a migraine, right? Now is time for me to take 2 days off of work, versus how might I have prioritized 2 days off prior? So demanding that individuals kind of put our health and wellness first without feelings of guilt. So as leaders, if we demonstrate that, right, if we take time off, if we show that this is kind of the culture that we're creating, and we discuss it, we share about it, we normalize it, then others around us won't feel that same level of guilt. Maybe we talk about what our plans for self-care are, some of which you shared in the chat, right? But we declare our needs. We don't feel shy about it. We know that our kind of state of mind, body, physical health, it matters in order for us to carry out the duties that we have. And we give each other permission. So think about the team that you work with within your organization. Maybe it's a small team, maybe it's a larger team, maybe you have people reporting to you, maybe you don't. How might you, in your individual role, give other individuals permission to invest in themselves, to courageously kind of prioritize themselves? What might that look like? And what would the impact be, right? So as we think about how do we bring this idea of self-care to life, how do we work on enhancing our well-being? There's a couple of things that I want to share that I believe are important. So number one, we need to intercept the negative self-talk. So we need to intercept that voice that's telling us, right, that self-care is selfish, like we identified earlier. And some of the ways that we do that may vary. One of which I'm going to share with you is kind of knowing our ABCs. So what we think of with knowing our ABCs is we think of the A as an adversity, an event, a challenge, some type of stimulating event, right? That may trigger the negative thoughts. And the B is our beliefs, our thoughts around that. So we may have negative thoughts around that may tell us, we may be talking to ourselves or the situation, kind of judging ourselves. And what we need to think about is that when we are in that negative state of mind, when we're having those negative thoughts, that's affecting the C, which is the consequences. It's affecting our ways in which we're showing up, the actions that we're taking, right? So if we can kind of enter in and challenge the thoughts, whether it be that self-care is selfish or whatever it may be, or deprioritizing an item on a to-do list, maybe asking for help, maybe delegating a task to somebody else. If we can challenge and intercept that negative self-talk by looking at what is the belief, what are the thoughts that are going on around this that are causing me to not take action, that could help me kind of refuel, right? And if we can challenge that, then the consequences would be that maybe we take a break, maybe we do delegate, right? And that leads us to be more energized, to be more proactive. Taking a pause. So Charlie mentioned in the intro that I'm also a yoga instructor. And one of the things that I think about with yoga, didn't do yoga instruction to really teach yoga as much as I did to really understand how we use our breath and our connection with our body to be more mindful and how we move about this world. So when I think about kind of off your mat yoga, right? It's about taking a pause. It's about being mindful. It's about recognizing maybe we're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe, we know that we have to have a difficult conversation, or maybe we're getting ready to enter into a meeting where we know that, we're going to be kind of working through some challenges within the organization. So really important to see that being mindful, taking a pause, kind of entering in clear-headed and calm into situations is also a form of self-care, also enhances our well-being and our experience day to day. So it's not just about going to get our nails done or a spa day, right? Self-care is also the things that we do and how we move about our day. So we seek to convert challenges to opportunities. So that's a form of exercising kind of optimism, right? We see the glass half full versus half empty. So we know that challenges and changes are inevitable in our work, in our organizations, in our life. And so instead of saying, why did this happen to me? How can we overcome this? That's kind of where the optimism comes in. How am I going to learn? How am I going to grow from this? So adopting that type of mindset can help us in prioritizing self-care, but can help us move through challenges. So converting what seems hard into an opportunity to learn and grow. And then stepping into our power. So what does that mean? So exercising self-efficacy, having self-efficacy, exercising our agency, right? So this we can do it type of attitude. So essential in the work that we do in nonprofits. We often have limited resources, like we can do anything, right? Like we are so creative in meeting the needs of the community. So using that same thing for ourselves, like be creative in how we create opportunities to prioritize ourselves. It doesn't have to be a spa day. It doesn't have to be, something that costs money even. Many of you talked about walking outside. Maybe it's just sitting. Maybe it's just closing down the computer for a few minutes and actually having lunch away from your desk and noticing the taste and texture of your food, back to that kind of mindfulness, right? Like just really being present. So we have the power to make those decisions every day. So exercising that is a form of self-care. And then saying no to say yes. So when I mentioned that we often have the strength of being empathetic as nonprofit leaders, what are the boundaries around our empathy? So if we can exercise saying no, what might we be saying yes to? So oftentimes we think it's so hard to say no, right? But there's a yes on the other side of that no, right? And so what are the boundaries that maybe we can even preemptively think about in your life right now, in your work right now, around not being so drawn to overuse the empathy for other people, to think about turning that strength towards yourself. And then what would a practice of self-care, of prioritizing yourself look like every day? So this is one that I get super curious about. So maybe if folks want to drop something in the chat, but what would committing to a practice of self-care every day look like? I'm awarding you with a magic wand right now. So you don't have to commit to doing this, but what would a practice of self-care every day look like for some of you willing to share? Just drop it in the chat. Karina, anything coming in of you as of yet?
Yeah, we just start to get some responses. Taking quick 5 to 10 minute breaks, beginning the day in prayer or meditation even for 7 minutes, yoga or a walk every morning, eating healthy, time for journaling, getting up from the computer and taking a walk, sipping tea at sundown, shut down my computer by 5 p.m. and relax, deep breathing, protecting and taking your lunch break, taking time away from the desk.
So I don't know. I'm pretty sure, as I was following your train of responses there, none of them cost any money, right? They were all something that everybody could easily do. Maybe it cost them 15 minutes of sleep by getting up a little early, but pretty much all of those were easy in a sense to execute, right? To work into your day. And that's what the practice is. So I think about, one thing for me is I have an appointment with myself in the morning on my schedule. It says appointment with joy. I love to read in the morning. So that is my time. My self-care routine is that appointment with joy in the morning. And I choose to use that time to read. And I know some people mention prayer or meditation in the morning. Many people have gratitude practices in positive psychology. We have a lot of research around, evidence-based practices of using gratitude, daily noting of things that you're grateful for, boosts our subjective well-being. So even something as simple as that, piece of pen and paper by your nightstand before your feet hit the ground. But some type of practice to exercise, prioritizing yourself, taking care of yourself. And thinking about someone else I know mentioned, 5 to 10 minute breaks throughout the day. So back to earlier, I said, it's really hard to balance work and personal. I like to think of it more like an integration. And to me, that 5 to 10 minute break throughout the day is the ideal. Because we can have a really great routine in the morning where we, have our coffee, we read our book, we yoga, we meditate, we walk, whatever all of those things you said were. And then we come into work, and from 9 to 5, we're just grinding along. And my guess is the benefits of that, time that you took in the morning probably wear off by noontime, because we just dive right in. And that's kind of proven. There's evidence, right? That morning time it's in and of itself enough alone, right? So we have to think about, how do we break up our day? What do we do? Take a walk around the building, take that lunch break, work in those 5 minutes. Maybe it's connecting. Maybe what we do is we also reach out and connect. So a form of building resilience is reaching out resilience, which is we're connecting with others for support. Maybe we're saying, I'm really challenged to work in some time for myself, to prioritize my to-do list. Maybe we talk about that with our colleagues. My guess is they're feeling the same way. But through connection, just like you did at the beginning, you're able to see there's a lot of wisdom in this room. And then maybe it's reflecting. So reflecting, this to me is one of my, I think, most effective offerings when it comes to enhancing your well-being, is focusing on what is working, what went well today. So there's a positive psychology intervention that we call 3 blessings or 3 good things, 2 different names, same thing. But at the end of every day, it could be at the end of your physical day, just before you go to bed at night. It could also be a very good ritual at the end of your day, especially if you're remote working at 5 o'clock, to kind of give a closeout to the day. Identify 3 things that went well today and jot them down on a piece of paper. And then by each of those things, identify why it went well. So just like the gratitude practices that I mentioned earlier, this kind of hones our attention on what's working versus all the things that may have gone awry for the day. We focus on what's working. By identifying then why it went well, you might see a common thread. Well, that meeting went well because I took 15 minutes before to prepare myself. Or, that meeting went well because I took a walk around the building before I went and did that. Or I did a little meditation break. Right. So you start to notice themes when you identify the why for each of the what went wells. So I encourage you, research has shown that if you do that for 7 to 10 days straight, the benefits last for up to 6 months after the actual intervention of doing that for 7 to 10 days straight. So it's a little science experiment if anyone wants to try that as a means of self-care after this. So another little point of reflection to jot this down here as we kind of get closer to wrapping up. What would it look like to improve your self-care? So I want to look at, how does the quality of your leadership diminish, maybe because you don't take care of yourself? Or which habits are negatively impacting your own self-care? What new behaviors could you substitute for them? Do you even have a self-care plan in place that would help you follow up with yourself on these new behaviors? How might you track progress along the way? Might that be an accountability buddy? What might that look like? And then how might you best support others around you, part of your team, within your organization, in their self-care endeavors? So I think it's important to just kind of identify some of these questions and your initial thoughts and answers to them. as we look at what this looks like to prioritize yourself. So as we're building our own plan, a couple of areas for you to focus on. So when we're making goals for our self-care, you think of 3 kind of main domains: physical, mental, and emotional. So I have a list of items. You'll receive this slide deck after the presentation, so it may be helpful to return to. Maybe it's good sleep hygiene. Maybe it's getting some sunlight. Maybe it's dancing in the kitchen, right? Maybe it's for mental, it's more of reading or mindfulness or being in nature, those walks that you mentioned. For the emotional part, maybe it's more connection with friends or colleagues, journaling, processing our emotions. So kind of looking at each area and identifying some goals for yourself. Maybe making a vision board, right? Of what does it look like? What do you really want to be bringing more of into your life? Is it walks? Is it healthy food? Is it rest? Is it yoga? But kind of maybe bringing this to life in a visual form, maybe help you bring it to life in kind of a real life physical form. And you'll get the slide deck, and purposefully I've kind of made this so that you can use it as your own little roadmap, right? So what are your ideas in each of these areas, physical, mental, and emotional, to kind of cure even a bad day? What are the things that are going to be your go-to? Pin these up, put these somewhere. Have a resource for yourself. So sample, we talked about kind of daily gratitude. So in the morning, print out these pages, right? 3 things that I'm thankful for this morning. My little caveat with this is it can't be the same 3 things every day, right? 3 new things every day. And it's amazing what that does for our brain to really shift to look for and identify new things every day that we're grateful for. We're on the lookout more so every day. Maybe set some intentions. What are 3 things that will make today amazing? Look at your calendar, right? You might have a lot of things your mind can easily go to, oh, this is such an overwhelming day. But what would make today amazing? What can I do differently to make today amazing? And maybe what are 3 things on my to-do list or on my calendar that I'm looking forward to? If in the morning you can really kind of start your day and get excited, right? And maybe it's an affirmation or some type of reminder, right? I'm loved, I'm capable, I'm enough. Maybe you need, that works for some people, doesn't work for everyone. But this is just kind of a guide, right? But things that you can be excited about, that you're looking forward to, can be really helpful in prioritizing yourself for the day. And then, just like I said earlier, end the day with some type of reflection of what went well. Why did it go well? What does that have me excited for the next day, right? You can start this today. Just look at what's gone well already today. What could make today even better for you? You could take this and track your activity, right? So start today, Wednesday, May 17th, right? Sleep well, meditate, exercise, journal, whatever your list is, create a little tracker for yourself. Attention and intention are key when we're instituting ways for prioritizing ourselves. Maybe we bring this out for the whole month, right? It's going to be a busy time of year, event season, whatever that may look like, summertime, summer camp programs for the organizations that work with kids, right? So how does this look? How do I want it to look? What does it need to look like? And just a couple common myths, right? I think when we think about an organization, we often think that, maybe paying people more won't make a big difference. Oh, well, we'll just throw some health and wellness classes, or yoga classes on the schedule. And that means that we're checking the box for well-being for our teams or self-care. Maybe we're always prioritizing external communications and we're not really honing in on how we're communicating within the organization and the team and inviting, celebrating folks that are exercising good self-care habits. Maybe we're we're seeing ourselves as not having a lot of power within our organizations, going back to that agency and self-efficacy and practicing taking care of ourselves, really feeling more empowered. And then kind of taking this out to that whole pathway to the organizational well-being. So using this little chart to help you in identifying, as an organization, how are you measuring your well-being with your interpersonal area, community, as an individual, physically, psychologically, economically. So this aids us. It's called the ICOPE model, Dr. Isaac Perlatensky, and identifying areas for self-care interventions, those pathways to well-being. Where do we need to focus? Everyone is different at the individual level and then at the organizational level. What do we need to put into place? So in summary, by not prioritizing ourselves, we will burn out if we never refuel our energy, right? We never pull off the side of the track. It's not a sign of strength to deny ourselves the ability to take care of ourselves. So if you choose to believe the negative and deflating stories that our brains tell us, right, then we're self-sabotaging as well. If you try to do everything alone and hide kind of your needs and your overwhelm, maybe judge yourself, right, and keep that from everyone else, you'll burn out. We have to reach out. That's where the resilience comes in. Connect with others that are likely feeling the exact same thing. And we will ensure our well-being by prioritizing ourselves if we refuel. And that's emotionally, mentally, physically. Treat ourselves with the empathy and compassion that we extend to others in the amazing work that we do. Intercept the negative self-talk. Remember the ABCs, right? Challenge the beliefs and thoughts that lead to the consequences and the actions that we take. And acknowledge and accept the many different things that we feel. So in positive psychology alone, I would say we don't just focus on the positive emotions. We also have to experience and honor the negative emotions as well. Don't deprive ourselves of that, as we can't benefit from the positive emotions if we don't experience the negative. And then cultivate the honesty and meaningful relationships with other people so that we feel that support and connection with those around us on our team. So our opportunities, right, as nonprofit leaders, as boards, as funders, right, is to talk about self-care, to celebrate our successes, to invest in ourselves. Connect people to our mission, but in such a way that they see that taking care of themselves is essential for that mission to come to life. Encourage each other. Top of your agenda for your staff meetings. What's one act of self-care that you've done today or this week, right? Bring it to the top of the agenda. Use technology where we can, right? As a form of delegation, managing projects, whatever that may be. But look to build community through bringing this to the forefront and promote a culture of learning and growth, right? Performance is one thing. What we produce, our results are one thing. But it's also just as important to have that culture of learning where people feel psychologically safe to make a mistake and to learn and grow from it. And I would encourage you all to find your flow. For those of you in Florida, right, this picture may look familiar with the waves rolling in, but we become what we consistently practice. So practice consistently what you want to become. That's from my on the mat yoga, sharing wisdom with you all. And know, just as I said earlier, intention and attention. So my experience is what I agree to attend to. Only those items which I notice shape my mind. William James, founder of psychology. So where are you putting your attention? And know, a little note to yourself, you rock, right? All of you deserve to take care of yourself in some way, shape, or form. And I'm excited to hear some questions to wrap up our time together today. I thank you all for being here. And there's a little QR code there. If anyone wants to connect with me for a follow-up, I'd be happy to chat with you, go deeper. So thank you. Throwing it back to you, Karina.
Thank you so much, Kristen. What an excellent presentation. Timely every day, it seems, to have this conversation. I haven't seen any questions come in through the chat, but we did get a few when folks were registering. So, Kristen, if you have an extra few minutes and you'd like to go over those, I realize not everybody will be able to stay with us on the call, but it will be included in the recording. So we can just go through those questions, and if you need to leave, you are welcome to, and you'll be seeing the recording in the next couple of days. So first question, Kristen, is how do you curtail distractions coming from every direction?
Yeah, so good question. Yes, and the QR code I saw as well will come with the slide deck, so you will get that later. Sorry, it went way too fast. So curtailing distractions. So to me, that it goes back to the practice of mindfulness, right? And to honing in on what truly matters in that moment. So I think about all of our competing priorities and needs around us coming in from different directions within the organization. And to me, that's where we go back to strategy, right? What is the vision and mission of the organization? How are we strategically thinking about how we're getting there? And is well-being part of that strategic decision to get there? That may help curtail the distractions, right? So we have to make well-being kind of part of the thread of our organization, our strategy towards whatever goals we're seeking to execute in whatever given time frame. So that's my thoughts and recommendation, but I'd also say there's a lot of great wisdom in the room if anyone wants to drop anything in the chat or share.
Thank you so much, Kristen. The next question is, when there are so many items that seem to be a priority, what do you do to get them all done and still make time for yourself?
Yeah, so one technique that I share with clients that I work with is it's called an 80-20 rule. So oftentimes we're going into our work, and if we really care about it and we're really passionate, which I'm sure all of you are, right, then you're wanting to do 100% of the things, 100% quality, 100% of the time, right? And it's just not possible. So by exercising the 80-20 rule, we are looking at what items on this list, right now in front of me, fall in the 20% bucket where quality really matters. So we have to challenge ourselves a little bit, but where quality really matters, like, maybe it's a new program launching, maybe it's the fundraiser that's coming up, maybe it's a direct client interaction, someone that we're serving, something that's happening, right? So quality really matters. And then the 80% bucket is those items on our to-do list where, this is the harder part, where we say good enough is good enough. Like it can't be perfect, right? So maybe that grant report goes in the 20% bucket, but then, the follow-up email to this potential collaboration partner within the community, is going to be good enough. I'd love to have done a proposal for them, but, I'm just going to have to set a time later in the future. So hopefully that's helpful. So kind of exercising that 80-20 rule for ourselves can be really effective in prioritizing ourselves.
Great, thank you, Kristen. So we just got one question in the chat. If you have time for that, then I think that will be our last question. Mm-hmm. So this question is, do you have any examples of desk de-stressing exercises you can do at your desk?
Yes. So a couple of different things that I've introduced. It may be as simple as, if you're sitting in your desk right now, scoot yourself back in your seat. Really look down, kind of feel your feet on the floor. If they're in shoes, if you're barefoot, kind of wiggle your toes in your shoes. Feel the seat underneath you. Maybe roll your shoulders up and back. Maybe you close the computer screen down. Maybe you focus on an item on your desk. Maybe you just close your eyes. Kind of get into a meditative space. Maybe just come to your breath. But you could also, do a little stretching, right? There's a lot of things, chair yoga and things like that. So you can kind of physically move yourself. But I think a lot of it has to do with our technology. So just bringing it back to, shutting it down for a little bit, your laptop, your computer screen, giving yourself that break. There's also a lot of apps. So people mentioned in the beginning, the Calm app. There's guided meditations on YouTube or visualizations and things like that. You know, I have in front of me right now, I have pictures of my kids. I have one of my favorite candles. I have a little plant. I have some sea glass and a shell. So I have a lot of things to kind of look at, to kind of just ground myself with whatever I'm doing, whether I'm presenting or having a one-on-one with a client. So think about grounding yourself and creating your environment, even just around your desk. Yeah, so I see somebody else put that. Yeah. But using some technology sometimes can be helpful. There's a lot of things online if you did want to use online programs.
Okay, well, thank you again so much, Kristen. Thank you for sharing this wonderful presentation. Thank you to everyone that participated today. Again, we'll post the recording and the slide deck on our website within the next couple of days for you all, and you'll get an email to let you know when they've been posted. Please reach out to us if you have any questions, and keep your eyes out for our upcoming webinars. So everybody have a great afternoon.